Hello, and thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Maddie Hadwick, and I will be going over mediating a workplace conflict. Starting with just a brief overview of the conflict we will be covering today, Wasatch investors just returned to in-person work after 2 years remote during COVID. The entire research department, which is half of the company, has developed a consistent routine working at home, and the head of research is named Laura, and she is one of our participants today, and is she demanding an option to work at home remotely. The sales team flourishes in an in-person environment, and head of sales Kim is here today as our second participant, and she is demanding that the entire office be in person. So this debate is a conflict between productivity and autonomy. The roles today, or our participants, is me first as the mediator, who is a neutral third party who facilitates communication and negotiation between conflicting parties to help them reach a voluntary and mutually acceptable resolution. Laura, who is our head of research, and her role today is here to lobby for a full remote schedule for her employees, supporting their ideal research process. And Kim, the head of sales, whose role here is to advocate for a full in-person schedule for the entire firm, supporting her sales mission. The mediation process is a structure that ensures fairness and emotional expression, and along with productive dialogue. So, in this mediation, we would start with an introduction. So, I'd introduce myself and allow our two participants, Kim and Laura, to introduce themselves as well. Then we would go into my mediator monologue, which would cover some essential things such as confidentiality, some details about how the process is voluntary, and some ground rules of respectful communication, in addition to some other information. We would sign this agreement to mediate, and then would go into our opening statements where both Kim and Laura would have a chance to share why they're here, their sides, what they feel like is the reasons for their positions. And then through these opening statements and opening comments, we would have the chance to set an agenda. And then after that agenda, we would have discussion based off of those topics, which we had kind of figured out we needed to talk about in that agenda. And then potentially, I think it could be beneficial for both Kim and Laura to do a caucus where they would meet one-on-one with me for a confidential meeting. I would not disclose any information they shared with me if it was not agreed upon to be disclosed. And then the caucus would just allow them to have an opportunity to give me more information without having to reveal too much to the other side that they didn't want to. After all of this conversation, we could do some idea generating and options. And then after that section, we would do our options evaluation. So seeing after just strictly coming up with ideas, which ideas are feasible, and then hopefully coming to a final agreement. And if not, just a final decision that maybe whether that's litigation, whatever it is, we would come to a kind of finishing point and an action point. So first, looking at the interests of our parties here. First, Laura, who is the head of research, she values flexibility, work-life balance, trust and autonomy, and maintaining a developed workflow. Whereas Kim, her interests are collaboration, strong company culture, accountability, and consistency. However, they both have shared interests of overall employee satisfaction and retention, the success of the company, and long-term stability. So though Laura and Kim see these shared interests coming about in different ways, it is important that we identify that they do have shared interests, so there is a ground for compromise. So why mediation? Why is this a good decision for them at this point in time? First of all, they have an ongoing relationship. Wasatch is made whole only by the collaboration between both sales and research. So Kim and Laura need to collaborate because one cannot exist without the other. The sales team has nothing to sell if the research department isn't doing its job. However, the research department doesn't have a job if the sales team doesn't find customers, right? So they need to find a way to have a solution for this that maintains their collaborative relationship. Additionally, there are multiple perspectives with two entities involved. There are multiple components at play. Also, there's really no clear right answer. Both sides have legitimate reasons for their position, and there are emotional and practical aspects. Like I said, this isn't black and white, and one that really impacts lives and lots of employees. So mediation can be a great way to come up with a creative solution that makes both parties satisfied. So starting with our negotiation timeline analysis, our way to analyze this mediation, we're going to go through each 7 of these stages and analyze them through these lenses. Starting with emotions, research, which represents Laura. So Laura is written as research, sales is written as Kim, but sorry, it's kind of confusing, but that's just how it's structured. I structured this. But so Laura, she's frustrated, she's lacking a bit of control, and she desires autonomy and just acknowledges that her and her team feel burnt out after COVID. They've just created this routine, everything's changing, and they are just wanting to keep everything the same, and they are frustrated and wanting to control the situation. Kim and Sells are also frustrated. They're concerned about consistency, they desire communication and collaboration. So, before negotiation can truly happen, both sides need space to express frustration and feel heard. So, emotions are here, they're very powerful. We are our emotions, and so this is a super important part of the mediation and negotiation timeline is hearing where we are at, what we are feeling, so we can move forward into seeing some of our positions. So also tied into this is research wants entirely remote work. So Laura and her team want just remote work, and Kim and her sales team want a complete in-office presence. Now, these positions aren't necessarily helpful, but it's useful to see where they're at currently. And these are really rigid positions, but they don't necessarily explain why each side feels this way, which can kind of lead us into agenda setting. So these are some things that me as a mediator can use to reframe our conflict into topics that can be actually discussed. So kind of bite-sized pieces that are able to be solved. So four of these things can be work location and expectations, productivity measurement, communication norms, and team collaboration. So after we had kind of discussed kind of some of the emotions coming into this, frustrations, and then our demands, our two positions, these were the four things that we decided we could talk about to hopefully try to get closer to a middle ground. So obviously the location is very relevant versus remote online, and then kind of some of those underlying things that are tied to location, such as how are we measuring how productive we are being, and then how we're communicating, especially if we're in different locations, or if we're in person, how's that different than us being on remote, and also how collaboration ties into all of these things. So with discussing those things, we kind of revealed some of our underlying interests with researches, as we covered a little bit earlier, but just kind of touching on it again, is there's being able to work in a comfortable environment, having the autonomy to work when most convenient. They have long days, almost 8 to 10 hours every single day. Research can be a grind. And also just an interest of having trust and flexibility. Sales looks for open communication with research to make sales easier, accountability to ensure members of the team are working equally as hard. It's hard to know what people are doing when they're not in office, and they value company culture and professional relationships. Oops, sorry. So then we come to our option generating. So this is where we're just coming up with ideas, trying to be creative. We're not trying to judge yet. So for the ideas we came up with was a hybrid schedule where we work Monday, Wednesday, Friday in office, Tuesday, Thursday out of office. Two is 1 week on, 1 week off. So 1 week in office, 1 week out of office. Three is performance-based remote work. So those who are performing well or meeting our standards or quotas have the ability to work remotely. And last is out of office team bonding, and having that just be a required event. So yeah, like I said earlier, the goal here is to generate as many solutions as possible without judging them yet, which then leads us to our feasibility and movement. So taking those four options, we're thinking of what are the costs of each, the trade-offs, productivity impacts, employee satisfaction. So maybe 1 week, one off, like that'd be great because people would be happier because everyone gets to do a little bit of what they want to do. However, maybe some of those costs and trade-offs is like a difficult workflow. Maybe there's some productivity impacts if you're not being able to get into good flow, being 1 week one place, 1 week the other place. We talked about some of the pros that could come with an out-of-office kind of culture retreat. So maybe that would contribute to both sides just being happier, feeling more connected. So this is where you really can just judge how applicable are those options we created. And then last, hopefully this gets to an agreement, which we decided a hybrid office compromise would be best fitting for the company and most satisfactory for both research and sales, which was Monday, Wednesday, Friday in office, then Tuesday, Thursday remote with this flip-flopping weekly. This agreement made both teams happy. It satisfied most of their costs while identifying those underlying interests of collaboration, communication, while also allowing research to have a couple days at home to be in their happy space while also meeting sales where they're at and understanding that they really value that company culture and communication. So in this agreement is a written understanding with a mutual agreement and satisfaction on both sides. And this closure really ensures clarity and accountability so the conflict doesn't resurface, because we are not trying to have them go to litigation or go back to mediation again. And that is a wrap. Thank you so much.